War and Peace, Book 5, Chapter 16. Read for LibriVox.org by Roger Moline. In April, the troops were enlivened by news of the Emperor's arrival, but Rostóv had no chance of being present at the review he held at Bartenstein, as the Pávlograds were at the outposts far beyond that place. They were bivouacking. Denísov and Rostóv were living in an earth hut, dug out for them by the soldiers and roofed with branches and turf. The hut was made in the following manner, which had then come into vogue. A trench was dug 3½ feet wide, 4 feet 8 inches deep, and 8 feet long. At one end of the trench, steps were cut out, and these formed the entrance and vestibule. The trench itself was the room in which the lucky ones, such as the squadron commander, had a board lying on piles at the end opposite the entrance to serve as a table. On each side of the trench the earth was cut out to a breadth of about 2½ feet, and this did duty for bedsteads and couches. The roof was so constructed that one could stand up in the middle of the trench, and could even sit up on the beds if one drew close to the table. Denísov, who was living luxuriously because the soldiers of his squadron liked him, had also a board in the roof at the farther end, with a piece of broken but mended glass in it for a window. When it was very cold, embers from the soldiers' campfire were placed on a bent sheet of iron on the steps in the reception room, as Denísov called that part of the hut, and it was then so warm that the officers, of whom there were always some with Denísov and Rostóv, sat in their shirt sleeves. In April, Rostóv was on orderly duty. One morning, between 7 and 8, returning after a sleepless night, he sent for embers, changed his rain-soaked underclothes, said his prayers, drank tea, got warm, then tidied up the things on the table and in his own corner, and his face glowing from exposure to the wind and with nothing on but his shirt, lay down on his back, putting his arms under his head. He was pleasantly considering the probability of being promoted in a few days for his last reconnoitering expedition, and was awaiting Denísov, who had gone out somewhere and with whom he wanted to talk. Suddenly he heard Denísov shouting in a vibrating voice behind the hut, evidently much excited. Rostóv moved to the window to see whom he was speaking to, and saw the quartermaster Topchéenko. "I ordered you not to let them eat that Moshkva stuff," Denísov was shouting, "and I saw with my own eyes how Lazarchuk brought some from the fields." "I have given the order again and again, your honor, but they don't obey," answered the quartermaster. Rostóv lay down again on his bed and thought complacently, "Let him fuss and bustle now, my job's done and I'm lying down capitally." He could hear that Lavrushka, that sly, bold orderly of Denísov's, was talking as well as the quartermaster. Lavrushka was saying something about loaded wagons, biscuits, and oxen he had seen when he had gone out for provisions. Then Denísov's voice was heard shouting farther and farther away, "Saddle! Second platoon!" "Where are they off to now?" thought Rostóv. 5 minutes later Denísov came into the hut, climbed with muddy boots on the bed, lit his pipe, furiously scattered his things about, took his leaded whip, buckled on his saber, and went out again. In answer to Rostóv's inquiry where he was going, he answered vaguely and crossly that he had some business. "Let God and our great monarch judge me afterwards," said Denísov, going out, and Rostóv heard the hoofs of several horses splashing through the mud. He did not even trouble to find out where Denísov had gone. Having got warm in his corner, he fell asleep and did not leave the hut till toward evening. Denísov had not yet returned. The weather had cleared up, and near the next hut 2 officers and a cadet were playing sveiká, laughing as they threw their missiles which buried themselves in the soft mud. Rostóv joined them. In the middle of the game the officers saw some wagons approaching with 15 hussars and their skinny horses behind them. The wagons, escorted by the hussars, drew up to the picket ropes, and a crowd of hussars surrounded them. "There now, Denísov has been worrying," said Rostóv, "and here are the provisions." "So they are," said the officers. "Won't the soldiers be glad!" A little behind the hussars came Denísov, accompanied by two infantry officers with whom he was talking. Rostóv went to meet them. "I warn you, Captain," one of the officers, a short thin man, evidently very angry, was saying. "Haven't I told you I won't give them up?" replied Denísov. "You will answer for it, Captain. It is mutiny, seizing the transport of one's own army. Our men have had nothing to eat for 2 days." "And mine have had nothing for 2 weeks," said Denísov. "It is robbery. You'll answer for it, sir," said the infantry officer, raising his voice. "Now, what are you pestering me for?" cried Denísov, suddenly losing his temper. "I shall answer for it and not you, and you'd better not buzz about here till you get hurt. Be off! Go!" he shouted at the officers. "Very well then," shouted the little officer, undaunted and not riding away. "If you are determined to rob, I'll... Go to the devil, quick mach, while you're safe and sound!" And Denísov turned his horse on the officer. Very well, muttered the officer threateningly, and turning his horse he trotted away, jolting in his saddle. "A dog astride a fence, a wheel dog astride a fence!" shouted Denísov after him, the most insulting expression a cavalryman can address to a mounted infantryman, and riding up to Rostóv he burst out laughing. "I've taken transports from the infantry by force," he said. "After all, can't let our men starve." The wagons that had reached the hussars had been consigned to an infantry regiment, but learning from Lavrúshka that the transport was unescorted, Denísov and his hussars had seized it by force. The soldiers had biscuits dealt out to them freely, and they even shared them with the other squadrons. The next day the regimental commander sent for Denísov, and holding his fingers spread out before his eyes, said, "This is how I look at this affair. I know nothing about it and won't begin proceedings, but I advise you to ride over to the staff and settle the business there in the commissariat department, and if possible, sign a receipt for such and such stores received. If not, as the demand was booked against an infantry regiment, there will be a row and the affair may end badly." From the regimental commanders, Denísov rode straight to the staff with a sincere desire to act on this advice. In the evening he came back to his dugout in a state such as Rostóv had never yet seen him in. Denísov could not speak and gasped for breath. When Rostóv asked what was the matter, he only uttered some incoherent oaths and threats in a hoarse, feeble voice. Alarmed at Denísov's condition, Rostóv suggested that he should undress, drink some water, and send for the doctor. "Twy me for wobbery! Oh! Some more water. Let them twy me. I'll always thrash scoundrels. And I'll tell the Emperor I..." he muttered. The regimental doctor, when he came, said it was absolutely necessary to bleed Denísov. A deep saucer of black blood was taken from his hairy arm, and only then was he able to relate what had happened to him. "I get there," began Denísov. "Now then, where's your chief's quarters?" They were pointed out. "Please to wait." "I've ridden 20 miles and have duties to attend to and no time to wait." "Announce me." "Very well, so out comes their head chief. Also took it into his head to lecture me." "It's wobbery." "Wobbery, I say, is not done by a man who seizes provisions to feed his soldiers, but by him who takes them to fill his own pockets. Will you please be silent? Very good. Then he says, 'Go and give a receipt to the commissioner, but your affair will be passed on to headquarters.' I go to the commissioner, I enter, and at the table, who do you think? No, but wait a bit. Who is it that's starving us?